The Sonoran Desert, which spans the border between northern Mexico and the United States, is a harsh environment. But at least it usually rains in the summer. The animals that live here have to be highly adapted to survive. They include this, the desert tortoise, and the cactus wren. Many, like the ground squirrel, are active only during the cooler parts of the day, retiring to their burrows to avoid the intense heat. Reptiles like the rosy boa are particularly well suited to desert life. Their scaly skin helps them to preserve valuable moisture. The long-nosed snake is harmless, but its coloration may deter predators as it hunts for lizards among the rocks. The rattlesnake certainly is highly venomous. Its venom is designed to kill the rodents and the other small mammals that it preys on. It shares its desert home with one of the only two species of lizard in the world with a venomous bite. It is a primitive reptile, heavy-bodied and slow-moving, but its bright coloration is a warning to all that this is the Gila monster. At almost 2 feet in length, the Gila monster is the largest lizard in the United States. Its head is thick and powerful, its eyes quite small. The tail is used as a fat store in times of plenty, and unlike that of most other lizards, it cannot be shed when danger threatens. Its claws are strong and sharp, not for climbing, but for digging in the baked desert soil. Like most reptiles, the Gila monster's tongue is forked and very sensitive. It is used to track down the essentials in life, such as a mate and food and water. Water is very important to a Gila monster because its skin is poorly adapted for a desert reptile. In fact, it leaks like a sieve, so whenever water is available, the lizard drinks avidly while soaking it up like a sponge through its skin. The lizard's skull reveals it to be the owner of a battery of large, sharp teeth. The Gila monster's poison glands, unlike a snake's, are in its lower jaws, and the venom trickles along grooves in the teeth and into the wound. Its skull is also covered in bony plates called osteoderms that give it extra strength and protection. But the Gila monster's venom does not seem to have evolved for dispatching prey. Its jaws and teeth alone can do that. Unusually for a reptile, the venom causes instant, intense pain, although it's rarely fatal to humans. It seems to be a highly effective anti-predator device for those animals which ignore the lizard's warning coloration. The Gila monster's prey consists mainly of reptiles and small mammals. In this case, the luckless victim is a whiptail lizard. Although the lizard tries to escape by throwing off its tail, the venom has already taken effect, and it is dead within minutes. First its tail, and then its body are swallowed whole. When the Gila monster was first described around the middle of the last century, no one was really sure whether it was venomous or not. So it was given the scientific name of Heloderma suspectum. When it was decided that it was venomous, the fallacy persisted for many years that its venom was a result of the lizard having no anus, and so all the toxic waste products of its digestive system had to be expelled through its mouth. This was, of course, complete nonsense, although few people in those days were brave enough to examine the creature too closely. Because of its lack of agility, most of the Gila monster's mammalian prey tend to be the young in the nest. Here they're the pups of a wood rat. But the lizard's favorite food, and the easiest to obtain, are eggs. They are always eaten, shell and all. Late spring and early summer marks a burst of activity in the Sonoran desert. Temperatures are gently rising, promoting greater activity among the wildlife. Plants are still green and in blossom before the long, hot summer turns their leaves dry and brittle and a uniform brown in color. Butterflies make the most of their short-lived source of nectar. During the early morning and the late afternoon, the desert tortoise emerges from its deep, cool burrow to feed. It will eat almost any vegetable matter. Even the driest shoots provided with sufficient nourishment. But it will only spend short periods out in the sun. After a few minutes, it heads for the nearest shade. The ground squirrel also avoids the intense heat. And its activity closely matches that of the tortoise. It rarely ventures far from its burrow in search of seeds and insects. Hawks, coyotes, bobcats, and many other animals prey on ground squirrels. The cactus wren invariably chooses the prickliest locations for its nest. A cholla cactus is ideal. Few predators could reach the nest here, and its contents are certainly safe from the egg-loving Gila monster. It is during late spring that these venomous lizards emerge from their underground retreats, where they have passed the colder winter months. They have been living on their reserves, and their bodies and tails are now thin and wasted. An adult Gila monster has very few natural enemies, but early in the year many crawl out onto roads and highways in order to warm up more quickly on the artificial surface. It is an act that often proves fatal. It is now, as the reptiles reach their peak of activity and have started to lay down reserves in the form of fat, that mating takes place. The male, the two sexes are virtually indistinguishable, lies above his mate with his forelimbs over her back. During copulation, which may last up to an hour, he occasionally rubs his chin against her back. In a few weeks' time, she will lay between 2 and 10 large white eggs in an underground chamber. They will take around 10 months to hatch, so the appearance of the young lizards coincides with the more favorable conditions of spring. The Gila monster really is quite poorly adapted to desert life. It only survives here in Sonora because of the desert summer rainstorms. Its close relative, the world's only other venomous lizard, lives much further south, deep within Mexico's humid subtropical forests and grassland. It was probably under these conditions that the heloderms evolved, which would account for the Gila monster's leaky skin that is so poorly adapted for desert life. The seasons here are governed by rainfall and not by temperature, and the other wildlife is much more exotic. The groove-billed Arnie feeds its young. It is a member of the cuckoo family, but it doesn't leave the rearing of its young to other species of birds. Large grasshoppers are on the menu today. In spite of its size, the insect is easily swallowed by the chick. Beneath them, on the forest floor, a pair of tamanduas are busy ripping open a termite nest. These anteaters spend a lot of time in trees, descending to sniff out ant and termite nests, which they tear apart with strong claws. A vine snake slips almost unnoticed through the branches. Its camouflage is very effective. Its body may reach 4 feet in length, and yet it is not much thicker than a pencil. It even sways like the branches that it mimics, so as not to be seen by its lizard prey. But this lizard is not on the menu. The Mexican beaded lizard is the Gila monster's closest cousin, but at a length of almost 3 feet, it is much bigger. A large part of this, however, is tail, which doesn't play such an important role in the storage of fat. Beaded lizards are very variable in color. This one is a uniform brown with just a few patches of yellow showing through. They are enough to persuade any would-be predator that it is not a creature to be meddled with. Apart from their tail and coloration, they are almost identical to the desert-dwelling Gila monsters. In every respect, they too have venom that causes instant, intense pain, a fact known when they were first officially described. The beaded lizard is known to scientists as Heloderma horridum. In some parts of Mexico, men still test their reactions by swiping their hand through the open mouth of a beaded lizard, otherwise known as El Escorpion. It's usually after a great deal of tequila has been drunk. Deaths due to lizard bites, if any, usually occur during these contests. While some Mexicans were busy testing their manhood, others were discovering more about Mexico's wildlife. In 1950, beaded lizards were discovered living high up on an extinct volcano in Chiapas, the southernmost and most tropical of Mexico's provinces. The strange thing was, they were completely black. Black beaded lizards are only known from 2 or 3 locations in this part of the country. Apart from their coloration, they differ from the normal race in that they are very solidly built and regularly enter water. Strangely, though, this black variety starts off life with exactly the same coloration and pattern as the normal type. But as the lizard grows, it darkens, and by the time it is almost full size, at 6 or 7 years of age, it becomes completely black. It differs too, in that while all its relatives usually lead a more or less solitary life, the black beaded lizard is often found in small groups. Exactly why it is completely black remains a mystery, but it is interesting that many populations of lizards elsewhere in the world, separated from the rest of the population, are often black or melanistic. The black beaded lizard, high up in its volcanic crater, has been isolated in exactly the same way from the rest of the brightly marked population. All beaded lizards share the Gila monster's love of eggs. One quick swallow, and it doesn't even crack the shell. The helmeted iguanid goes to great pains to ensure that its eggs are not discovered and eaten. The black-beaded lizards usually live in a warren of underground tunnels and caverns, which they excavate with their powerful limbs among the tree roots. When they are not active, their burrows can be identified by the pieces of shed skin and the tracks left by their tails. In the Chiapas, where the adults have no known predators, these slow-moving lizards can reach a ripe old age of 20 or even 30 years. But today, there is a new threat, one that can even reach the lizard inside its burrow. The crater, like much of the surrounding countryside, is being cleared to create farmland. And the lizard is not just losing its habitat, it is facing a much more direct physical threat. The burning scrub fills the burrows with thick, choking smoke, and many of the reptiles die of asphyxiation. Those that do survive emerge into a hostile world with no cover and no food. When the dinosaur was disappearing from the face of the earth, the beaded lizard was already well established in its subtropical home. Now, it seems, with the help of man, one of the world's most remarkable lizards may well follow its gigantic cousin into extinction.
Many of us have kept or come across a pet tortoise at some time or other in our lives. But few of today's children will see one outside a zoo or park. Of the 60 or so species of land tortoise, most are now classed as either endangered or at least vulnerable. Tortoise-like reptiles evolved around 200 million years ago. When fully grown, they have few natural enemies other than man. We've always hunted them for food, and more recently for the pet trade. Today, we're desperately trying to save the world's tortoises, especially those species on the very edge of extinction. The term tortoise really refers only to land species. Those shelled reptiles that live in the sea are turtles. Their shells are normally flattened, and their limbs modified to form powerful flippers for swimming. Only the females ever venture onto land to lay their eggs. But the terrapins are truly amphibious and inhabit the fresh water of rivers, lakes and swamps, from which they regularly emerge to bask in the sun. Unlike their cousins, the tortoises and turtles, terrapins are mainly carnivorous. They'll catch and eat almost any animal they can overpower, in or out of the water. But the familiar tortoise is almost entirely herbivorous. Food needs are easily met in captivity. That's why they make such popular pets. But their long-term well-being requires much more effort and patience. Proper tortoise care involves meticulous preparation for the months of hibernation each winter. Given the proper care and attention, a tortoise can live 30 years or more in captivity. But 99% of tortoises imported died during or soon after their first hibernation out of the wild. Tortoises were so cheap and readily available that if a pet didn't emerge from its shell in spring, a new one was bought straight away. They were so popular as pets and imported in such numbers that tortoise races were regularly held. although they could be rather long drawn-out affairs. There was, however, a dark side to the pet business. Between 1967 and 1977, 2.5 million tortoises were imported into Britain. They came from Turkey, Morocco, Yugoslavia and Greece on lorries and ships, packed 6 or 7 deep in crates and baskets. Many did not survive the journey, and others arrived in poor and desperate condition. Relief came in 1984, when the importation of tortoises for the pet trade was banned in all EEC countries. Today, the trade in Mediterranean tortoises has all but ceased. A few dedicated specialists do have some success in captive breeding. But tortoises are not designed for mass production. Their eggs take around 3 months to hatch, and it may take 6 or 8 years for this hatchling to reach sexual maturity. Captive breeding has led to one remarkable discovery, though. It's possible, by incubating the eggs at differing constant temperatures, to influence the sex of the offspring. A constant 28 degrees Celsius produces males, 32 degrees Celsius produces females, while 30 degrees, or a fluctuating temperature, results in a more or less equal sex ratio. The hatchling tortoise is a perfect miniature replica of its parent. Its shell is slightly wrinkled at first, but soon swells. As the reptile grows, its armor plating will become harder and stronger. But the gentle tortoise faces other threats, as well as collection for the pet trade. Tortoises are regularly eaten in many parts of the world. In South America, the yellow-footed tortoise is regularly found in markets, where its meat is sold as a popular delicacy, alongside piles of terrapin eggs. Behind the market lie the heaps of empty tortoise shells. The shell itself is made up of the reptile's ribs that have broadened and fused together during the course of evolution. It's an effective defense against natural predators, but no match for machetes and hacksaws. The yellowfoot is a tropical forest species, and as well as being collected for food, is also threatened by the destruction of its habitat. Yellowfoots spend some of their time along river banks and regularly enter the water. Their forest home, too, is regularly flooded. Because of this, specimens are frequently swept out to sea, and it was probably a yellowfoot, or one of its larger extinct relatives, that washed up on the shores of the Galapagos Islands. The islands have never been connected to mainland South America. They rose as molten lava from the seabed about 2 million years ago. Tortoises are ideally suited for accidental sea travel. Their lungs are high up under their domed shells, so that they're very buoyant. They can also go without food for weeks, or even months. Their hard shells also protect them from a battering on the rocks as they're washed ashore. We don't know whether they floated across the 600 miles from the mainland to the island or hitched a lift on a passing log. But once ashore, the tortoises proved to be ideal colonizers in other ways. A single female tortoise can lay up to a dozen eggs, and because she can store sperm, may continue to lay fertile eggs after several years of isolation. Because they live so long, even if a male wasn't washed ashore for many more years, the original colonizers could still thrive. The first arrivals would have found tortoise paradise. Many of the islands would have had a lush vegetation, grown up from seeds either washed ashore or carried across in the stomachs or plumage of some of the early bird colonizers. Nature has a tendency towards gigantism in isolated island species, and the Galapagos tortoises are among the largest living reptiles on Earth. In any case, there was no shortage of food. There were no other herbivores on the islands. Once established, the tortoises were probably accidentally washed to the other islands in the group. Isolated from nearby cousins, the different races of tortoises evolved subtle differences. Over a dozen distinct races are now recognized. Others have appeared and disappeared and are known only from their shell fragments. One of the strangest forms is the race that lives on the island of Hispaniola. They have long legs, a long neck, and a raised arch at the front of their carapace. These are the giraffes of the tortoise world, and have evolved to feed at the top of the plants. The island on which they live is dry and sparse in vegetation. Cacti, flowers, and fruits form a major part of their diet. The tortoises lived and thrived in their island paradise, and quickly evolved into the dominant land animal. They even helped Darwin formulate his theory on the origin of species when he visited the island on board the Beagle in 1835. But it was also during the 19th century that whalers and other mariners started regularly to visit the islands to collect water and fresh meat in the form of tortoises. In 1830, 13,000 tortoises were collected for food. So many were taken that some island races quickly became extinct. Today, these tortoises are being moved not for food, but to preserve them from extinction. A serious fire has broken out on the island of Isabella. The fire could threaten a unique and isolated race of tortoise, so a makeshift corral is being built in a safe part of the island. The tortoises are rounded up, but despite their large size, finding them in the thick vegetation is not an easy task. Catalina flying boats, specially equipped for fighting forest fires in Canada, have been flown here to help save the island's wildlife. Each Catalina picks up 8 tons of seawater, taking it on board through a narrow scoop in the hull. It's an exercise that calls for some highly specialized flying. But luckily, other races of tortoise inhabit the wetter parts of the island, where they can wallow in the mud, and the risk of a bushfire is minimal. But for one island race, extinction seems certain. Only one specimen remains of the Pinta Island tortoise, an old male called Lonesome George. There's now a concerted effort to save the other races from following in his footsteps. Natural breeding for the tortoises is very difficult. Their eggs and young are eaten by introduced rats, pigs and dogs. Freshly laid eggs are now collected from known nesting sites to be artificially incubated at the Darwin Foundation on Santa Cruz Island. A giant tortoise egg is about the size of a tennis ball and takes up to 9 months to hatch. Now we know that the sex of the hatchlings depends on their incubation temperature. Every effort is made to ensure a good sex ratio, although their sex won't become apparent for many more years yet. The hatchlings are weighed, measured and marked. It will be several years before the tortoises will be big enough for release back into the wild. Captive breeding programs are underway for races of tortoises from the islands of Hispaniola, Santiago, Pinzon, Santa Cruz, San Cristobal and Isabela. To date, over 1,000 tortoises have been taken back to their home islands. Across the other side of the world, on the island of Madagascar, the race is on to save another species of tortoise from the brink of extinction. In the last 5 years, Don Reed and his colleagues have increased the world population of ploughshare tortoises from 30 to 60. But it'll be several years before the first of the offspring will be big enough to release back into the last remnants of its dwindling habitat. The ploughshare tortoise gets its name from the bony prong that juts forward from the bottom of its shell. The males use them to joust with rivals, while the female looks on. When one of them has had enough of pushing and barging, he retreats into the undergrowth. The victor can then resume the same technique with the female, but this time with different consequences. Despite their appearance and reputation, tortoises are remarkably active animals. Fights between male North American desert tortoises may last up to an hour if the reptiles are reasonably matched in size. A contest between a large and a small male is usually over quite quickly. The smaller tortoise is often flipped over onto its back. Unless he can right himself quickly, he'll perish in the heat of the sun. But contests such as these only serve to strengthen the genetic makeup of the species, resulting in fitter, healthier tortoises. Competing with man, however, has only one inevitable consequence. The open deserts of California that are the home of the tortoise are becoming increasingly popular with people looking for recreation. Motorcycle tracks scar the dunes, crushing tortoises and collapsing their burrows. Some tortoises are simply shot. They make an easy target. With man has come his rubbish and an explosion in the number of ravens that once found life in the desert too harsh, but now thrive on the scraps of food left behind. They eat large numbers of tortoise hatchlings. One estimate suggests virtually all the hatchlings in some areas are eaten by ravens. But life isn't always hostile in the desert. Every few years, the deserts bloom, and the tortoises enjoy a rare glut of food. Yellow flowers seem to be a particular favorite of most herbivorous reptiles, whether it's in the deserts of North America or sandy plains of Africa. A baby leopard tortoise picks off the yellow petals and deliberately ignores the green leaves that it would normally eat. Most animals in this part of Africa gather at the waterhole to drink, and the leopard tortoise is no exception. However, a simple exercise like taking a drink can prove hazardous if you're small and slow-moving. As ever, that shell cushions the blow. The tortoise's shell is its only form of defense. It's obvious to the lions that what they've found is edible. The problem is, it's too well wrapped to get inside. All of the lions take it in turn to investigate. It's a little like pass the parcel, but this time with no prize at the end. When it's safe to emerge from its armor, the tortoise heads off unscathed. Most tortoises shelter in burrows or holes to escape the rain or scorching sun. But one species has become a specialist crevice dweller and has forsaken the safety of a hard shell. The pancake tortoise is aptly named. Its flattened shell is thin and flexible, but this does afford it increased mobility so that it can scuttle away to the nearest rock crevice when threatened. Once safe, the reptile can lock itself in place with its legs. It's almost impossible to dislodge it. Once again, the king, or in this case, the queen of the beasts, has been foiled by the lowly tortoise. Over the last 200 million years, tortoises have learnt to deal with everything that nature has thrown at them. Now it's our turn to save those that we have pushed to the verge of extinction. If any animal has shown itself tough enough to survive, it's the tortoise.